What if I told you that a brutal, genocidal war broke out in the middle of modern Europe, in the age of televisions, telephones, and the internet, and most people don't even remember it happened? What if I told you that in this war, entire cities were flattened, civilians were slaughtered, and concentration camps existed, not in 1940s Germany, but in the 1990s? This is the story of Bosnia, the worst war you never learned about. It was a war that began with a lie, grew in the silence of the international community, and ended in a peace that barely held the pieces together. But before we can understand how it all fell apart, we need to know what held it together. There was once a country called Yugoslavia. It was an experiment in unity. A country made up of different ethnicities: Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Slovenes, Montenegrins, and Macedonians, all stitched together under one banner. After World War II, it was ruled by a man named Marshal Tito, a strongman who held the country together through iron will. Tito understood one thing clearly: in a country this diverse, if any one group dominated, the whole system would fall apart. So he banned ethnic nationalism. He suppressed it hard. And for decades, Yugoslavia worked. It had problems, sure. But people lived side by side. Muslims, Christians, and Orthodox Serbs went to the same schools, lived in the same neighborhoods. But in 1980, Tito died. And the glue began to peel. Without Tito, the delicate balance cracked. The economy collapsed, old ethnic grudges re-emerged, and politicians began using nationalism to gain popularity. In a few short years, Yugoslavia went from a symbol of multicultural peace to a battleground of hate. By 1991, the edges started to break off. Slovenia declared independence. Its war lasted 10 days. Then Croatia did the same, and that war was bloody. But Bosnia was the real explosion. The heart of the country, and the heart of the storm. Bosnia and Herzegovina was the most diverse republic in Yugoslavia. Nearly 44% were Bosniaks, Muslim, 31% were Serbs, Orthodox, and 17% were Croats, Catholic. 3 groups. No single majority. A ticking time bomb. In 1992, Bosnia held a referendum for independence. Nearly all Bosniaks and Croats voted yes. But the Bosnian Serbs boycotted the vote, and then took up arms. They weren't alone. Backed by Slobodan Milosevic, the Serbian president in Belgrade, and supported by the remnants of the Yugoslav People's Army, Bosnian Serb forces mobilized fast. Their goal? To carve out a new territory, Republika Srpska, for Serbs only. What followed was a war not just of soldiers, but of civilians. In the spring of 1992, the capital Sarajevo was surrounded. What came next was the longest siege of a capital city in modern history, longer even than Leningrad during World War II. For 1,425 days, the city was pounded by artillery. Snipers picked off civilians, people queuing for bread were blown apart, children were killed walking to school. Electricity, water, food, all cut off. Sarajevo became a prison, and the world watched. But this wasn't just about a siege. This was about ethnic cleansing. Across Bosnia, Serb forces swept into towns, rounding up Bosniaks and Croats, separating men from women, burning villages, destroying mosques and Catholic churches. In camps like Amarska and Trinopolia, detainees were beaten, starved, tortured. Women were raped systematically, not by accident, but as a weapon of war. A method of domination. Thousands of them. In the center of Europe. While the world hesitated. And then came Srebrenica. A small town. Declared a UN safe area. Thousands of Bosniak refugees fled there hoping for protection. But in July 1995, General Ratko Mladic and his forces entered the town. They separated the men and boys from the women, loaded them onto buses, and took them into the woods. Over the next few days, 8,000 men and boys were executed. Shot in the back, dumped into mass graves. Some graves were dug up and moved later, to hide the evidence. This was the worst genocide in Europe since the Holocaust. And the UN peacekeepers, outnumbered and outgunned, stood by helplessly. Srebrenica was not an exception. It was the result of years of inaction, years of denial, and a global community paralyzed by bureaucracy. But Bosnia's tragedy didn't end there. In 1993, even the fragile alliance between Bosniaks and Croats broke down. The Croat forces, backed by Croatia, began fighting the Bosniaks in a bid to control territory. It became a three-sided war. In the city of Mostar, Croat artillery destroyed the iconic Stari Most, a 400-year-old bridge that had symbolized unity between Muslims and Christians. Now it was rubble. Just like the country. Eventually, the United States and NATO intervened. After the horrors of Srebrenica and another market bombing in Sarajevo, NATO launched airstrikes against Bosnian Serb positions. The tide began to shift. Under pressure, the warring sides came together in Dayton, Ohio, to negotiate peace. The result: the Dayton Accords, signed in December 1995. The war was over. But the scars were permanent. Bosnia was now a single country, but divided into two entities: the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, controlled by Bosniaks and Croats, and Republika Srpska, controlled by Bosnian Serbs. 3 presidents. 1 weak government. A frozen conflict. It stopped the bloodshed, but it didn't bring peace. And what about justice? The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, set up in The Hague, began trying those responsible. Slobodan Milosevic, the architect of the chaos, was arrested but died before the verdict. Radovan Karadzic, the Bosnian Serb political leader, was convicted of genocide. Ratko Mladic, the butcher of Srebrenica, sentenced to life in prison. But what about the survivors? The mothers still searching for the bones of their sons? The orphans who grew up in ruins? The refugees who never returned home? Today, Bosnia remains divided. Nationalism is rising again. Schools are still separated. Politicians use fear to win elections. Some even deny the genocide ever happened. Statues have been built for war criminals. And many in the world have forgotten the war ever occurred. But that's why this story matters. Because this wasn't ancient history. This was a war of modern times. This was a war in the age of CNN and satellite news, in the land of Olympic stadiums and universities. A place where people lived side by side, until they didn't. It shows us how quickly things can fall apart. It shows that democracy, peace, and coexistence are not guaranteed. They're built every day, and they can be destroyed overnight.